NM cable, commonly known as non-metallic sheath cable, has specific installation requirements detailed in the National Electrical Code, or NEC. These requirements are intended to ensure safety and prevent damage to the cable. Understanding the rules regarding stapling and securing NM cable, especially when it passes through studs or enters a junction box, is crucial for proper installation. Regarding the question of whether staples are required when NM cable is running through holes in studs, even if the holes are spaced less than the minimum fastening distance according to NEC section 334.30, the answer is yes, staples are indeed required. The code mandates that NM cable must be supported and secured by staples, cable ties, straps, hangers, or similar fittings designed and installed so as not to damage the cable. Section 334.30 specifies that NM cable must be secured at intervals not exceeding 4½ feet where run exposed and supported within 12 inches of boxes, cabinets, fittings, or other cable terminations. Therefore, even when NM cable passes through holes in studs, these holes do not negate the need for additional support and securing methods at intervals no greater than 4½ feet and within 12 inches of terminations. Consider a scenario where the NM cable runs horizontally through a series of studs with holes drilled for its passage. Even if the spacing between the studs is less than 4½ feet, staples are still necessary to comply with the code. The purpose of the staples is not solely to keep the cable in place within the wall cavity, but also to prevent strain on the cable and its connections over time. This is particularly important in situations where the cable may be subject to physical stress or vibration. Now let's address the situation where the NM cable includes vertical sections. The same stapling rules apply to both horizontal and vertical runs. Section 334.30 does not provide an exception for vertical runs that would allow for the omission of staples if the cable is passing through holes in studs. The requirement to secure the cable at intervals not exceeding 4½ feet remains in effect regardless of the cable's orientation. It's important to note that the holes in the studs must be bored so that the edge of the hole is not less than 1¼ inches from the nearest edge of the wood member. This protects the cable from nails or screws that might be driven into the wall in the future. However, even with properly bored holes, staples are still necessary for compliance with the NEC. When NM cable is secured via a clamp in a junction box, the question arises whether a staple is still required within 12 inches of the box. According to NEC section 334.30, a staple is indeed required within 12 inches of the junction box, unless the cable enters the box directly from a bored hole through a stud, joist, or rafter. The purpose of this requirement is to provide additional support to the cable as it enters the box, preventing strain on the connections inside the box. The clamp in the junction box secures the cable at the point of entry, but it does not eliminate the need for a staple nearby. The staple helps to distribute the weight and tension of the cable, reducing the likelihood of the cable pulling loose from the clamp or damaging the conductors inside the box. However, there are exceptions, which apply in specific scenarios. Firstly, if the cable enters the box through a knockout and is supported within 12 inches by a framing member, a staple is not required. Secondly, if the cable is fished through a wall or ceiling cavity and enters the box directly from the wall or ceiling without any exposed cable, a staple may not be necessary. However, in most cases, especially where the cable is exposed for any significant distance before entering the box, a staple within 12 inches is required. Now let's consider the practical implications of these rules. Imagine an electrician wiring a new outlet in a living room. The NM cable runs from the breaker panel through the wall cavity and into a junction box behind the outlet. To comply with the NEC, the electrician must ensure that the cable is stapled at intervals not exceeding 4½ feet along its run through the wall cavity. Additionally, the electrician must install a staple within 12 inches of the junction box to provide extra support. If the cable is running vertically down a wall, the same rules apply. Staples must be installed at intervals not exceeding 4½ feet, and a staple is required within 12 inches of any junction boxes or other terminations. It is essential to use staples that are specifically designed for NM cable. These staples have a smooth, rounded surface that will not damage the cable's outer jacket. Using the wrong type of staple can lead to nicks or cuts in the cable, which can create a safety hazard. When installing staples, it is important to avoid over-tightening them. The staple should be snug enough to hold the cable securely, but not so tight that it compresses or damages the cable. Over-tightening staples can also make it difficult to pull additional cable through the run in the future. In addition to staples, other methods can be used to support and secure NM cable. Cable ties, straps, and hangers are all acceptable alternatives, provided that they are designed for use with NM cable and installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. These methods can be particularly useful in situations where staples are difficult to install, such as in tight spaces or on irregular surfaces. It is also important to be aware of the limitations of NM cable. NM cable is not suitable for all applications. It cannot be used in wet or damp locations unless it is specifically listed for such use. It also cannot be used in direct sunlight or where it is subject to physical damage. In these situations, other types of cable, such as UF cable or conduit, should be used. Proper installation of NM cable is essential for electrical safety. Failure to comply with the NEC can result in fire hazards, electric shock, and other dangerous conditions. It is always best to consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns about NM cable installation. Regarding the original inquiry, the clarification regarding NM cable fastening includes several key points. Firstly, even if NM cable runs through holes bored in studs, staples are still required at intervals not exceeding 4 1/2 feet, as mandated by NEC section 334.30. These staples are essential for providing support and preventing strain on the cable, irrespective of the presence of stud holes. Secondly, within 12 inches of a junction box, a staple is typically required to secure the NM cable, enhancing the cable's stability at the point of entry and reducing the risk of disconnections. Thirdly, understanding and adhering to these fastening guidelines is crucial for maintaining safe and compliant electrical installations. To recap, the NEC provides specific guidelines for the installation of NM cable to ensure electrical safety. Firstly, staples or other approved methods of support must be used at intervals not exceeding 4 1/2 feet along the cable run. Secondly, a staple is required within 12 inches of a junction box where the cable enters, unless specific exceptions apply. Thirdly, these requirements apply to both horizontal and vertical runs of NM cable. Fourthly, using the correct type of staple and avoiding over-tightening are important considerations for proper installation. Fifthly, consulting with a qualified electrician is always recommended if you have any doubts or questions about NM cable installation. The proper securing and support of NM cable contribute to the overall safety and reliability of electrical systems. By following the NEC guidelines, electricians and homeowners can minimize the risk of electrical hazards and ensure that their wiring is installed correctly. In addition to the stapling requirements, it is important to consider other aspects of NM cable installation, such as the proper sizing of conductors and the correct use of overcurrent protection devices. The NEC provides detailed information on these topics, and it is essential to follow these guidelines to ensure a safe and code-compliant installation. It is also important to be aware of any local amendments to the NEC that may be in effect in your area. Local jurisdictions may have additional requirements or restrictions on NM cable installation, and it is your responsibility to comply with these local rules. Finally, remember that electrical work can be dangerous, and it is always best to err on the side of caution. If you are not comfortable working with electricity, or if you have any doubts about your ability to perform the work safely, it is best to hire a qualified electrician. A professional electrician will have the knowledge, skills, and experience to ensure that your electrical system is installed correctly and safely. By understanding and following the NEC guidelines, you can help to ensure the safety and reliability of your electrical system. Remember to always prioritize safety and consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns. Let's delve deeper into specific scenarios and related code sections to further clarify the NM cable stapling and support requirements. Firstly, consider a situation where an M cable is run through a series of bored holes in studs that are closely spaced, say 16 inches apart. While the holes themselves provide some degree of support, they do not eliminate the need for additional staples. The NEC mandates that an M cable must be secured at intervals not exceeding 4½ feet, regardless of whether it passes through bored holes or not. This means that in this scenario, you would still need to install staples at appropriate intervals along the cable run, ensuring that the cable is adequately supported and protected from physical damage. Secondly, let's examine the exception regarding the 12-inch rule for staples near junction boxes. As mentioned earlier, if the NM cable enters the box directly from a bored hole in a stud, joist, or rafter, the requirement for a staple within 12 inches may be waived. However, this exception only applies if the bored hole provides adequate support for the cable as it enters the box. If the cable is unsupported for a significant distance before entering the box through the bored hole, a staple may still be necessary to prevent strain on the connections inside the box. Thirdly, consider the use of cable ties or straps as an alternative to staples. The NEC permits the use of cable ties, straps, or other similar fittings to support and secure an M cable, provided that they are designed and installed so as not to damage the cable. When using cable ties or straps, it is important to choose products that are specifically listed for use with an M cable and to follow the manufacturer's instructions for installation. These alternative methods can be particularly useful in situations where staples are difficult to install, such as in tight spaces or on irregular surfaces. Fourthly, it's important to clarify that the 4½ foot spacing requirement for staples applies to exposed runs of NM cable. If the cable is concealed within a wall or ceiling cavity, the spacing requirement may be relaxed, provided that the cable is adequately supported and protected from physical damage. However, it is always best to follow the 4½ foot spacing requirement, even in concealed locations, to ensure safe and code-compliant installation. Fifthly, let's discuss the importance of using the correct type of staple for an M cable. NM cable staples are specifically designed with a smooth, rounded surface to prevent damage to the cable's outer jacket. Using the wrong type of staple, such as a standard metal staple, can result in nicks or cuts in the cable, which can create a safety hazard. It is essential to always use staples that are specifically listed for use with NM cable and to avoid over-tightening them during installation. Sixthly, it is important to remember that an M cable is not suitable for all applications. It cannot be used in wet or damp locations unless it is specifically listed for such use. It also cannot be used in direct sunlight or where it is subject to physical damage. In these situations, other types of cable, such as UF cable or conduit, should be used. Seventhly, when running an M cable through metal studs, it is essential to use grommets or bushings to protect the cable from abrasion. Metal studs have sharp edges that can damage the cable's outer jacket, creating a safety hazard. Grommets or bushings are designed to provide a smooth, protective barrier between the cable and the metal stud, preventing damage and ensuring a safe installation. Eighthly, it is important to consider the ampacity of the NM cable when selecting the appropriate size of conductors and overcurrent protection devices. The NEC provides detailed tables and guidelines for determining the ampacity of NM cable based on its size, installation type, and installation conditions. It is essential to follow these guidelines to ensure that the cable is not overloaded, which can lead to overheating and fire hazards. Ninthly, always inspect NM cable for any signs of damage before installation. Damaged cable should not be used, as it may pose a safety hazard. Look for nicks, cuts, abrasions, or other signs of damage to the cable's outer jacket. If you find any damage, discard the cable and use a new piece. Finally, remember that electrical work can be dangerous, and it is always best to consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns about NM cable installation. A professional electrician will have the knowledge, skills, and experience to ensure that your electrical system is installed correctly and safely.